السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Bismillah-ir-Rahman-ir-Raheem. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا مولانا محمد صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين. Welcome everyone to our first meeting, inshallah. And as we agreed, we're going to start talking about the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and understanding the Quran through the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I hope everyone has been able to watch the first two. Our series is going to focus on understanding the Quran through the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As you probably have seen in the first introduction about the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we talked about touching about the events, touching about the names, the history, the narration of the Seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then adding some other layers, including some geography, some current events, and including especially a commentary on the ayat that were revealed, explaining and detailing the events in the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The books of Seerah in general start always with the narration about the lineage of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a descendant of Sayyidina Ibrahim ala nabina alayhi salatu wasalam. And some of the narrators of the Seerah go to a great extent trying to connect the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam completely without any interruption to Sayyidina Ibrahim ala nabina alayhi salatu wasalam. Although many scholars say that beyond a certain limit, they cannot be sure about that chain and the continuation of that chain. However, what we know is that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is indeed a descendant of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam through Sayyidina Ismail ala nabina alayhi salatu wasalam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he described himself, he would say, "Ana Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Abdul Muttalib ibn Hashim," and so on. And he would keep sallallahu alaihi wasallam going until he reaches a certain level, probably the level of Adnan, which was one of the major tribes in Arabia. And then he would pause sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then he would narrate sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he was a descendant of a continuous series of marriages, which means that none of his fathers or his forefathers was born out of wedlock, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is one of the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon his messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he came from a clean and pure chain that can be traced and that can be verified, especially by the Arabs. When he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, appeared in Mecca and started declaring his message, many of the Arabs tried to attack his person, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They had a lot of difficulty because, as we know, before the Ba'tha, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was known as as-Sadiq al-Amin. So they could not tarnish his reputation, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that they have themselves accepted and endorsed as a very fair person, a very honest and trustworthy person. Some of the events that confirm that is, as you probably are also have read in the books of the Seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he sallallahu alaihi wasallam was around late 20s, early 30s, and Quraysh decided to rebuild Al-Kaaba. There was a flood that affected the strength and stability of Al-Kaaba, so they decided to rebuild Al-Kaaba so that it doesn't collapse. And as we know, they demolished it and they started rebuilding it. And then they had the problem with who is going to place the black stone, Al-Hajar al-Aswad, in its place. And we know that at that time, the tribes of the Arabs were fighting and quarreling on the most trivial of reasons. And that would be a great honor to be the one who put the black stone back in place. So after deciding that they're going to go to war to settle this matter, one of them suggested, why don't we just, by sheer luck, accept the decision of the first person who would turn that corner? And then it was the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam who was the first person who turned that corner. And as soon as they saw him, they said, "Radina bihukmi Muhammad, radina bihukmi al-Amin sallallahu alaihi wasallam." So his reputation preceded him before the Ba'tha and before receiving the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Later on, I'm just going to fast forward a few times and then come back to our starting point. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam migrated in the 13th year of his Ba'tha, he left Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu behind him in Medina. And some people would wonder, why would the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam expose Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu to this mortal danger by leaving him in Medina? As we know, Quraysh was trying to kill the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved him and instructed him to migrate. The reason was that Quraysh, although fighting the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, opposing him and trying to kill him and giving all the accusations against him, they still trusted him sallallahu alaihi wasallam more than anyone else. So if they had any valuables, they would entrust these valuables to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the reason the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam left Sayyidina Ali behind was that he didn't want it to be said that he stole or he embezzled or he misappropriated our goods that we have entrusted him with. So he left Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu to stay back for 3 days and redistribute all the trusts that were in the custody of the Prophet ﷺ back to its owners. So that shows what kind of personality, what kind of character he sallallahu alaihi wasallam was known for, and that was extremely important for his credibility sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You would also read in the books of Seerah about some of the events that preceded his birth sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Many books start with a story about a dream, and that dream was by one of the kings of Yemen from the people of Tubba, Tababi'ah. He saw a dream that was very weird and he could not understand it. So he asked for someone to interpret that dream for him. The king's name was Rabi'a ibn Nasr, so that's not very important to remember. I'm going to tell you, by the way, when there's something important to remember, I'm going to tell you, remember that. And when it's not, I'm just going to pass by very quickly. So Rabi'a ibn Nasr saw a dream, and that dream was very weird. He saw a group of dark-skinned people descending on his country, invading it and occupying it. So that was very troublesome to him. Of course, Yemen was separated from the Horn of Africa by a very narrow passage at the bottom of the Red Sea, known as Bab al-Mandab. So they were always afraid of an invasion from what's now Ethiopia, Somalia, Djibouti, Eritrea, all of that part of the north of Africa. That was ruled primarily by a Christian kingdom that had its alliance with the Roman Empire, especially the Eastern Roman Empire in Byzantium. At that time, the Western Roman Empire in Rome had collapsed, and the seat of power of the Roman Empire moved eastward to Byzantium and to what's now Istanbul. It was known as Constantinople, but later on, after it was conquered through Islam, it became known as Istanbul. So when that king saw that dream, he started calling for people to interpret that dream for him. But he made a very weird condition. He said, I am not going to tell you what my dream was, because those who are going to be able to correctly interpret it are going to tell me first, what did I see in my dream? And then they're going to give me the interpretation. And no one managed to do that task except for 2 individuals. And the 2 individuals interpreted the dream in almost the same words. They used slightly different meanings, but it was exactly the same message. They said that you have seen those dark-skinned people descending on your country and occupying it and exiling your people, and they're going to settle in this area for a while. So he kept asking, and is that going to last forever, or is it going to stop at a certain point in time? And they said, it is going to stop at a certain point in time. He said, when would that be? And they said, it's going to stop with the appearance of the last prophet who will come from Arabia. So he asked them, this is so painful. Is that going to happen during my time, or is it going to happen after my time? And they said, it is going to happen after your time. So basically, he had that idea in mind that sooner or later, our country is going to be invaded by those. Can you hear me?
Yes,
okay.
You went out for a second, but you're back.
Okay, yeah, there was a call. I don't know how. Okay.
So
basically, the rest of the story is basically what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us about, which is at the year of the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this invasion took place, and the reason for that invasion is documented actually in 2 surah of the Quran. Surah Al-Fil, which we all have memorized when we were young, Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi ashabil fil. And the other surah is Surah Al-Buruj, was-sama'i dhati al-buruj wal-yawm al-maw'ud. So these 2 surah were relatively early in their revelation to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When we talk about the order of the revelation, by the way, and I guess pretty much everyone knows that, the order of the surah in the Mus'haf is not the order of the revelation to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We know that the Quran consists of 114 surah. About 88 of them are surah Makkiyah and the rest are surah Madaniyah. The surah that were revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Mecca primarily were, relatively speaking, short surah. They started with very short surah that are concentrated more or less in Juz Amma, the last Juz of the Quran, with some exceptions. And then the surah that were revealed to the Prophet ﷺ in Medina were primarily very long surah, like Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah Ali Imran, Surah Al-Nisa, Surah Al-Ma'idah. These are very long surah, and they were revealed not at once, but over a long period of time to the Prophet ﷺ in Medina. The ayat would be revealed to the Prophet ﷺ, and he would call the scribes, the ones who wrote the Quran that he dictated to them ﷺ, and he would say, put this ayah between these two ayat. So the order of the ayat, again, is not as, in the revelation, is not as we read them today. It is the Prophet ﷺ with guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who instructed his companions to put the ayat in that particular order. So it's an order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Also, the order of the surah in the Quran, it was revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So no one can say, well, I'm going to rearrange the Quran chronologically based on the very first surah that was revealed and going forward until the last surah that was revealed. That is not what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had approved or endorsed. So the way that the Quran is with us right now, the way that we read it right now, this is the way that was confirmed by the end of the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and no one should think about changing it. We also know that the very first Quran revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq in Surah Al-Alaq. Not the whole surah, by the way. The whole surah was revealed over the span of almost 3.5 years. But the very first few ayat were revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the first revelation when he sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in Ghar Hira. It is important to recognize the difference between the Quran of Mecca and the Quran of Medina because they have different characteristics. Not only the length of the surah, but also the tempo of the ayat and the contents of the surah themselves. Anyone who really reads the Quran with some thinking and some pondering would, in most of the cases, immediately recognize whether this Quran was revealed in Mecca or in Medina. We find, for example, some of the characteristics of the Quran revealed in Mecca. It is, as I mentioned, short surah predominantly, and then it addresses things that call for faith and call for thinking, pondering, looking around, trying to find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we find surah talking about natural phenomena like Ash-Shams, Al-Qamar, Surah Wash-Shamsi wa Duhaha, Surah اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر, سورة الليل, سورة الأعلى, سورة الغاشية, أفلا ينظرون إلى الإبل كيف خلقت وإلى السماء كيف رفعت وإلى الجبال كيف نصبت وإلى الأرض كيف سطحت. So all of these are ayat revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to his messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, telling the people around him, open your eyes, open your minds, ponder, think, watch. You will recognize by looking at the things that surround you that there's got to be a creator who created all of this universe, and not Allat or Al-Uzza or Mana or Hubal or any of the local idols or deities that you have in your temples or in your homes or in your public gatherings. So this is how we can see the first ayat to be revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. First, it started with a commandment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. And we're going to talk about that in due time, inshallah. And then we're going to find when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was worried about what he's receiving. Is that a jinn? Is that a mental disease? Is that something evil? Is some magician cast a spell on me? So when he went shaking and trembling to his wife, Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the two twin surah that are one after the other in the Quran. Surah Al-Muddathir and Surah Al-Muzammil. Ya ayyuha al-muddathir qum fa'andir and ya ayyuha al-muzammil qum al-layla illa qalila. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is comforting the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, telling him that what you have received is nothing but a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is supporting you, and so on. So it was comforting to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, knowing that this is not something evil. I'm going to again take a segue here to see what was the response of Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he received the first Quran. When he sallallahu alaihi wasallam received the revelation, and he came shaking and trembling, and she asked him what happened. He had gone to Ghar Hira, as he used to go every year, for solitude, to ponder and to think and to worship what he was trying to find, the creator of this universe. So when he came back prematurely, he cut his i'tikaf, or his tahannuth, this worship in the mountains, and he came back before it was due. Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha asked him what was going on, and he told her about what he saw. So she radiallahu anha, she was a very smart lady, mashallah. She asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, tell me about that thing that comes to you, meaning Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told her, I'm going to tell you when I see him next time he comes, I'm going to notify you. So when Sayyidina Jibreel came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam the following time with wahy, he notified Sayyidah Khadija. So she told the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, sit to my right, and he sallallahu alaihi wasallam did. She asked, are you seeing him? He said, yes. She said, okay, sit to my left. And he sallallahu alaihi wasallam did, asking him again, do you still see him? Yes. And then she said, all right, come and sit in my arms, in my lap. A very intimate moment. And then she asked him, do you still see him? And he said, no, he's gone. So she said, well, this is not an evil thing, because if it were something evil, he would still have stayed. And then, according to many narrations, Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha was hoping that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam be the messenger and the prophet that they were expecting. The cousin of Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha was one of 3 people or 4 people in Arabia who used to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without associating any partner with him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And his name was Sayyidina Waraqa ibn Nawfal radiallahu anhu. Remember that name, Waraqa ibn Nawfal, the first cousin of Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha. He was Waraqa ibn Nawfal ibn Abdul Uzza, and she was Khadija bint Khuwaylid ibn Abdul Uzza. So they were cousins. And she kept hearing from him. He followed the religion of Sayyidina Isa ala nabina alayhi salatu wasalam, the true religion of Sayyidina Isa, not the Trinity or all of the falsehood that the Christians added later on, but what was revealed to Sayyidina Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, and he kept searching for the truth. So he kept telling her that it's about time for that prophet to appear, that the one that we find in our books. We find his description, we find his character, and he kept telling her about details. Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha is listening to these details, comparing these details to the person that she has at home, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it's completely matching. So she was waiting for the declaration that this is the messenger that we have been waiting for and that my cousin has been talking about. So as soon as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam received al-wahy, Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha told him, Wallahi la yukhzika Allahu abada. I swear by Allah. And by the way, did the Arabs know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Of course they did. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us in the Quran about their weird understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَئِن سَأَلْتَهُمْ مَنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهِ. And if you ask them who created the heavens and the earth, they would say Allah. Later on, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had a discussion with someone who came, the leader of a tribe, who came declaring Islam. And basically the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked him, how many gods do you worship? And he responded, 7 on earth and 1 in heaven. Why 7 and 1? So 7 plus 1. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam started inquiring about which one is the most effective. So he asked him, so when you're scared, which one do you ask? He said, the one in heaven. When you're sick, which one do you ask? The one in heaven. When you hope for this, when you hope for that, when you do this, when you do that, which one do you ask? And the response kept coming consistently, the one in heaven. So the Prophet ﷺ asked, then what are these 7 on earth doing? And we know that most of the Arabs recognized Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They did not deny Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the name Abdullah was a common name among the Arabs, including the father of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even the word Abdul Rahman, again, that name was to a certain extent known in Arabia before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it was not unique to Muslims. Some of the Jews named themselves or their sons Abdul Rahman. But their understanding of the nature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's where the mistake was. They did not fully understand that they can address Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and approach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly without any go-between. So their argument was, we are sinners, we are mortals, we are full of mistakes, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is exalted, He's the Almighty, He's high in the heavens. How can we approach Him directly? We have to have some go-between. So the go-between are going to be these idols that they have created, whether it was Allat, Al-Uzza, Manah, Hubal, etc. And they said they are just a go-between to intercede between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the heavens. So as Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha responded to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he was scared, she said, Wallahi la yukhzika Allahu abada. I swear by Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never let you down. Why? What was the justification for this confirmation and this certitude that you will never be affected by something evil? And she started giving the justification and the substantiation of that oath. فَإِنَّكَ تُقْرِي الضَّيْفِ وَتُكْسِبُ الْمَعْدُومِ وَتُعِينُ عَلَى نَوَائِبِ الْحَقِّ وَتَصِلُ الرَّحِمِ وَتُطْعِمُ الْمِسْكِينِ. She kept reciting some of the characters of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You feed the hungry, you care for the orphans, you help people when they are affected by a calamity or a disaster, you connect the ties of kinship, and you are a very social person and sociable person. So for all of these things, I swear, the reciprocation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot be something evil to all of these good things that you are doing.
Dr.
Now
Ihab,
remember, yes ma'am.
Excuse me, sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure that we know, inshallah, in 2 minutes we'll be ending. We're
Okay.
gonna log out until 9 p.m. Bismillah, and then we will log back in until about 9:15 to make up for the technical difficulty time we lost.
Inshallah.
Okay,
Whenever
Sorry.
you tell me to stop, I'm going to stop, inshallah.
Okay, I was just trying to find a good stopping point. So
Allah
inshallah, if you could wrap up in 2 minutes, Bismillah.
Inshallah, inshallah. So basically, these words of Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha would be repeated later on, and we're going to mention that later on, inshallah, when it's going to be repeated, describing a different individual other than the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the first question for you guys, inshallah, when we get to the second session, who do you think that second individual would be who was described exactly as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was described by Sayyidah Khadija? He was described as تقري الضيف تطعم المسكين تعين على نوائب الحق تصل الرحم, and so on and so forth. So who was that person who received the same confirmation or the same testimony, who is exactly like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the eyes of others? So we can basically actually pause here right now, and our homework, or maybe our next session in the Q&A or in other sessions, we're going to talk about what's the significance of the Quran that was revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam at that particular time. Why did it care to talk about historic events like the event of Al-Fil, which we're going to visit in more detail, inshallah, either in the Q&A or in the next time, bi'idhnillah, and the story of Ashab al-Ukhdud in Surah Al-Buruj? Why was that particularly described in the Quran? And the answer to these two questions basically is that the Arabs knew about these two events because they had a special significance in the Arabian history, and most of the Arabs knew about that. So inshallah, let's pause here, and I'm going to stay online. So if you're going to log off and then come back, inshallah, we can resume. Jazakallah.